When we think about getting ready for exam day, one of the big things I want to touch base on before we even do anything is anxiety. And the anxiety curve, or anxiety distribution, sometimes it's called. Now, I've got a totally separate video about this where we get into a lot of detail. So if you feel like you don't test well, you feel like you get very nervous, hands get kind of cold, sweaty, or your body feels like it heats up when it comes test time, or things of that nature, check out my other video in a lot more detail. In a nutshell, here's the deal. Somebody's going to fit on this distribution you see on the screen. Now, if it's the too little commitment area, it means you're not giving something the attention it needs. Like when I did a human resources class in grad school, I pulled a B because I had statistics at the same time, and I knew that was going to take a lot of effort. And I figured, yeah, HR, I had that at the undergrad level. I pulled a B as a result because I didn't give it the attention it needed. The opposite extreme, shutting down. Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. Well, I don't want you being there. But somewhere in the middle, that discomfort, that little rumble in the stomach, maybe not so little, but that somewhat little to not super big rumble in the stomach basically means that you're alive. You're in the middle of this distribution, which means your fight or flight is kicking in and you've done the right thing. You've been studying, you've been copying the brain dump, you've been doing practice questions. So just remember, you've earned the right to take this test. And question by question, you're going to attack it. So some of the things from an exam day perspective we're going to talk about in this video. Now, when we think about when to take the test, so studying and scheduling is very important. I often get asked by people, well, how many hours does it take? I don't know. I mean, do you look at something once and go, yeah, that makes sense, next? Or do you literally have to beat your head against a wall until it really hurts to make something stick, or where between those 2 points? So I can't really give you that answer. When you're hitting the 85+% on practice questions, and it's not just a small sample where you might be memorizing the answers, that's a pretty good spot, But I want you to study at the time of the day when you're most alert. If you work 12 hours a day and then you come home and try to study, maybe you shouldn't be attacking this exam right now. But, come weekends, if you're a morning person, get up, do some studying, and then go enjoy the day, as an example. Now, also, when it comes to exam day, among other things, when it comes to scheduling it, I don't suggest you schedule it like on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday if you work a traditional week. Take it on a Sunday. Take it on a Monday. If it's Monday afternoon, don't go into work Monday morning. And also, don't tell everybody your test date. The people you cohabitate with, translate significant other and or kids, maybe even not even the kids, but the significant other, and your coach or trainer, somebody like me that you might be working with. We're the only ones that need to know. The people at work, they have good intention, but it's just going to create weight on your shoulders as the day gets closer because you're not going to want to disappoint them. Now, when we think about practicing, you're going to have an average of 72 seconds per question. And that's, 72 seconds is a number. If I said, what is 72 seconds? I mean, if you're an NFL quarterback and you have to keep a defense at bay for 72 seconds, that's a lifetime. Now, if that doesn't make sense, basically you're the guy that gets the ball and the defense is trying to get you, and if you don't get rid of the ball within about 4 seconds, you're probably getting tackled. So 72 seconds there could be a lifetime. But, if you get a question, what's the duration of a milestone? Yeah, highly unlikely it's going to be that simple, but some probably will. Then that's going to give you some additional time to answer other questions that might take more than 72 seconds. But trust me, some questions may be a little longer, some a little shorter, but on average, 72 seconds is what you've got. My rule of thumb, or my heuristic, I want you doing practice questions at about an average of 60 seconds a question. That way, if you get a bad luck of the draw On the real test, you start to have some anxiety, you get wrapped around the axles of some questions because of performance anxiety. You still have a pretty good natural cadence rhythm about you where, especially in that third and fourth hour, if you start to slow down because you're getting tired, you're still going to be going at a pretty good pace. Now, when we think about the test environment, in this case, as far as the eligibility letter, ID, things like that, that's assuming you go to the test center. So let's talk about that first. So in my case, I showed up at a test center once. I had the email on my phone, which had the unique ID on it, which was like my membership number, and then it was either 0 and a number or just a number. And so I think the number would be like 1, 2, 3, referring to like PMP, CAPM, the order PMI has released exams in. So until you get that unique ID, you could want to do this all day long. But once you get that unique ID, you're on the clock. No pressure. Be sensitive to names on your ID. Like at one point in time, I showed up at the test center to take a non-PMI exam, and I registered my application there as Tony Johnson, and my ID said Anthony Johnson, and they had to get a test center manager to approve it before I could take the test. Again, don't sweat it. Just yesterday, I had somebody call me from Florida and basically say, hey, I was in your class a few weeks ago. The state, they're like, my last name is like, this space that, and the state did not put a space in there. I did on the application. Is that going to cause an issue on the exam? I told the person I would not sweat that. If they get too caught up in there being a space in your name, God help PMI, because they got bigger fish to fry than that. Now, Tony and Anthony, or a married name and a maiden name, something like that, you might need to take the marriage license with you just to be safe, or a copy of it. Now, what to take to the environment. Now, this I'm going to talk about somewhat at home, somewhat in the test center. So if we think about it, anxiety or stress makes people kind of heat up. Sometimes in certain rooms, air conditioning isn't working as good as it should. If there's a lot of people, all of a sudden there's nobody, temperatures can fluctuate. So if you're at the test center, I would suggest you wear a long sleeve shirt that you can, kind of like a long sleeve t-shirt, you can kind of pull the sleeves up. You're probably not going to be, I know I say here a t-shirt with a sweater is a good combination. Sometimes that works, but generally if they wand you down with a metal detector going into the room, they're kind of serious about not having layers of clothing. So something, a one-piece top, you can roll the sleeves up would be a good thing, because if you get too hot or too cold, it's going to be hard to focus or concentrate. In the same breath, if you're doing this at home, think about it beforehand. If you're doing it in a room and the sun with the heat of the day is going to be causing the room to be hotter than normal or something, and that doesn't work well, take that into consideration. Now, this food or drink to the test center, I'm hearing kind of mixed results on that. Generally speaking, the theory is you can put things in the locker, but you're not really going to have a lot of time and capacity to go to the locker. So I would not sweat trying to do food and drink. You're going to have a chance to go to the restroom, get a little snow cone size thing of water you can shoot, things like that. That's going to be very valuable. I would say as well, don't overcomplicate the food and drink situation. Just, water. Think about the time of the day you're going to test. If you're going to test at 1 o'clock and you normally eat lunch at noon, you probably about a week before that maybe want to start eating about 11, so you get used to eating a little earlier, and then that way you still have some energy to carry you through the 4 hours, so you don't feel like you need to get some food or drink. If you need special accommodation, just like last night, I was talking to one of my students, and she got her notification in the last day or two. She gets 8 hours to take the test in a test center. And so she has ADD, and she's on medicine for it, and she had to get a note from her doctor, and it took a few months, but basically now she's going to get 8 hours to go in and take the test, and that's going to be very helpful for her. Because sometimes she gets wrapped around the axles of questions, and so I try to tell her, lock on to what you're drawn to originally and just move on unless you realize you misunderstood something. 8 hours in that case is going to help because she's not going to feel like she's under the gun. I also have had some people that have had type 1 diabetes be able to take insulin, testing supplies, food, water into the test center. Now, when you do get special accommodation, you get what I call the honeymoon suite. It's the private room at the end of the hall type thing. And I was able to do a test in there once because it was open, and I asked if I could go in there, and they said, yeah. And I got to tell you, it was pretty nice. They didn't have Leonard Skinner playing in the background or anything like that, but it beat the heck out of people hacking away at a keyboard typing an essay while I was trying to test. Now, if you're at the test center, I have not been inside a Pearson VUE test center since PMI changed from Prometric, but at least at Pearson VUE or at Prometric, they would have a circle here and a circle here where you would put your locker key and your ID. I would assume it's going to be of a similar level of intensity. Don't overcomplicate it. It is what it is. Also, be prepared to be wanded down with a metal detector every time you come and go. I'm talking arms up, pulled pants out, pants pockets out, hands in the back of the pants pockets, things like that. Again, if you're not hiding anything, you got nothing to worry about. Now, when it comes to questions, there's 200 questions on the test as it stands as of this recording, and I don't have any reason to think that's going to change unless something totally comes out of nowhere. They score 175 of them, and some people, they try to analyze which 25 these are, blah, blah, blah. You're never going to guess that. So here's the deal. I'm going to tell you how to pass this test. Very simply. Are you listening? You answer question 1 the best you can, and you don't worry about what's coming. You answer 2 the best you can. You don't worry about what you've done. You don't worry about what's coming. If you are really, really waffling on 2 answers, meaning you can't decide which it is, it's like, is it 6 or is it half a dozen? Literally that close, you mark it and you come back to it. But you don't do that to a lot of questions. And other than that, you just repeat that loop until you get done. Because if you worry about what's coming, you worry about what you might have answered, you're going to spend a lot of mental bandwidth second-guessing yourself and talking yourself into God knows what. So it's kind of like 200 plays in a football game. I'm not worried about playing in the 4th quarter. Right now, I'm worried about getting the ball, getting rid of it within 4 seconds, and hopefully moving down the field to the next, in this case, question. I do want to clarify here as well, this 175 questions. The 25 different, what that is basically PMI is testing the question. So they test the statistical performance of it. Do enough people get it right? So like I can go into the back end of our learning management system and I can see how many people get every question I've created correct. And, there's some that are maybe not as high as others, and I look at those and I go, do I leave it or do I change it? And with PMI in the exam, there's some number that it has to crest or some percentage that it has to crest to be considered a good question. In some of my questions, I might choose to leave it even though it's a lower percentage because it gives you a good opportunity to learn something, like questions that end in what process are you doing means one of the 49 processes, for example. Anyway, so let's continue. Now, when we talk about in and out of scope, a lot of times people think, I got a lot of experience. I attempted to read the PMBOK guide a time or two. I'm going to go pass this test. I'm going to knock it out of the park. Well, that's nice. Unless you do a lot of PMBOK guide type things at work, unless you do a lot of those documents, I'm not going to say the exact way, but a very similar way, and your environment is really set up like the PMI land zip code, as I call it, meaning you're a part-time or full-time PM. Functional management controls resources. You get resources from that functional manager. Senior management supports you, things like that. Unless you're in that environment, you're probably going to have some prepping to do still. So, so if we talk about things like a scope statement, a WBS, things like that, and you don't do them at work, be familiar with them, because those are things that could bite you when you least need them to. Now, again, we were talking about documents, structures, etc. Be sensitive to, the business environment as far as what drives a project or an initiative, roles and organizations as far as the structures and the various roles people might play, agile and hybrid approaches and tools and techniques, and then the processes and documents that get created and the order those processes occur within the knowledge area. So those are some things to be sensitive to. Now, when we think about theory pills, this is a huge area, because when we think about assumptions, essentially assumptions are things you believe to be or to not be the case. And so, like the assumption I want to make on most videos is I want to have them about 7 to 9 minutes long, because that's a really good attention span. This is going to be a longer one than that, unfortunately, because exam day is a pretty big thing. So I might say, yeah, theory pill, 7 to 9 minutes. It doesn't mean it's always the case. But if you think about it in the PMI land zip code, as I call it, and picture that. PMI, I'm not saying PMI headquarters. They kind of do things their own way. It's not good or bad. It's just, they do it their own way. But in the PMI land zip code, as it aligns with the PMBOK Guide Process Framework, I want you to think about what that zip code looks like, feels like, and functions like. And that's what these theory pills are going to help frame. Meaning, I want you to factor these things in as early as possible to any of your study, because they're going to help shape what your study looks like and your comprehension. So the first theory pill, engaging stakeholders and managing their expectation early and often is of primary importance. If you can't manage stakeholder engagement as early as you can identify that stakeholder, good luck keeping that project under control. It's just not going to happen. Now, historical information can contribute to your corporate knowledge base, future estimating, and organizational process assets, or OPAs. So basically, take history and learn from it. Repeat what worked well, don't repeat what didn't. And then it's assumed documentation exists. So in other words, if you do a project and all the details are in your head and you got hit by a bus, that's not good for you or the project. So you need documentation showing what's going on the project. Meetings should be done following the rules we'll talk about in the communication chapter. The agenda and things of that nature, for example. Now, risk must be considered when estimating time or schedule and cost or budget, if you will. This is a huge thing, so I sometimes use the example in my live classes. I'll do this. I'll say, okay, I'm looking through a hole in the fence. I think it was a Tom and Jerry cartoon I saw as a kid. Tomcat smells a steak grilling or something, in the backyard. As he's walking down the street, he looks through a hole in the fence and he sees the barbecue grill and he sees the steak on it. So he jumps the fence and he goes running over toward the steak. He didn't see the bulldog in the backyard, and the bulldog doesn't like the tomcat. Well, all he saw was this. He didn't see all of this. So when we think about risk, when we say, okay, how long is this supposed to take, or how much money is this supposed to cost? Anything that could get in the way, that could go differently than planned, that could cause it to take more money, take more time, cost more money, etc., that's risk. Now, one thing I commonly hear people say, and I don't ask people what they saw on the test. I say, did I prepare you well? Is there anything I could have done better? And I'm of the impression, I don't care how good of a plan you put in place, if you cannot control unnecessary change, that plan is irrelevant. So, so you want to be sensitive to change requests, and you want to be sensitive to approved changes. And I'm of the opinion that they probably will try to test you to get you to so to speak, jump off sides. So, for example, if you got a question that says the sponsor looks you up and says this change has to be implemented immediately or the product is not going to be useful, and the sponsor has said it will not cause any budget or schedule impact, what do you do? And one of the answers I could all but guarantee is going to be do the change now or something to that effect. Well, sponsors saying it's not going to cause budget or schedule impact. Yeah, I got a 16-year-old daughter. I'm a custodial father with a 14-year-old son and a 16-year-old daughter as of this recording. Do you know how many times in the last 2 or 3 years I've said to my daughter, you don't know what all is on my schedule. You don't know what all I'm trying to do today. When you want me to run you to the mall to hang out with your friends just like you did yesterday type thing or something like that. And I use that as an example because you got teenage, well, I'm not saying sponsors are like teenagers. Some might be if they were not told no enough as kids, but hopefully that's not yours. Where I'm going with that is the sponsor is not in the trenches with you to know the details of what you're doing. So for all you know, they might say we need this or it's going to be useless, but not going to cause any budget or schedule issue according to the sponsor. That's a great distractor, so don't bite on it. We've got some video in the stakeholder area where we talk about how to analyze changes, and there's some step-by-step to go through there. Now, apply the processes described in the boot camp manual, self-paced class, this video, what have you, but apply the processes the way we talk about them, not just what you do at work. And then this is a really passionate one to me. The value of the WBS cannot be overemphasized. All planning is based on the WBS. Now, I got to admit, I want to throw a little down the road knowledge into this video. So I was on the team that helped make the 7th edition PMBOK guide, and as of this recording, it's not out yet. And I am going to say I've got a separate video that talks about the January 2nd, 2021 exam change. That test is not based on the 7th edition PMBOK guide either. Processes being referenced would be from this current 6th edition, even though there's a lot more sources than just the PMBOK guide itself. Now that said, I was wondering how are we going to have a work breakdown structure and a product backlog both be addressed in the PMBOK guide. And so because in the Agile world we use a thing called a product backlog. If you're not familiar with it, you will be by the time you're done with me. And so the WBS is a decomposition of project work. Here's the project, here's the main pieces of the project, here's the main pieces of the main pieces of the project. You just keep breaking it down. If it's an outline, it's various levels of depth in the outline. Now, from there, product backlog is a list of everything that the product owner potentially wants. Or when we were kids, or at least those of us that are a little older, JCPenney and Sears had Christmas catalogs. You'd dog ear corners, you'd circle things, and and that basically translated to here's everything I want for Christmas. And mom and dad would look at the budget and the priority of items, and then they would determine what you were going to get. So this WBS, with what I'm describing here, be it a product backlog or a WBS, it's very important to the project. Now, I'm of the impression 7th edition PMBOK guide, based on what I did with helping create it, it appears, assuming it doesn't get killed in layout or editing, that there's going to be a thing called a product breakdown structure or something to that effect, which basically functionally is going to be kind of like a product backlog / WBS. Not sure exactly how the definition is going to play out, but that's kind of a combination there, if you will. Now, that said, some people think this is just a high-level schedule thing, like it's those upper pieces of the schedule before I get all the way indented. No. It's a scope thing, a schedule thing, a cost thing, every knowledge area it contributes to, because what it does, it tells you what's in the project, piece by piece. Now, our next theory pill, the project manager is responsible for delivering project results in scope, on schedule, and on budget. You know, last week I sat in on a conference call, Career Evolution or something like that, with my local PMI chapter. And one of my alumnus was on there, and he was speaking, and I was listening because, you know, I like to be able to speak intelligently to my student base if they ask me about, you know, what's the job market like, and or, you know, what advice could you give me, and, you know, things like that. So he was saying that, you know, when he interviews people, he asks them about projects they've been on and how they, you know, what they do to get a project back on track. And he said pretty much anytime somebody says to him, oh, my projects are always on track, he says pretty much at that point, I'm done talking to him. He goes, I'm polite, I wind it down, but everybody, unless you've only done one project, you've had to get it back on track, and maybe you haven't been able to, but you've had to try. So the PM at the end of the day is ultimately the single party responsible for delivering in scope, on schedule, and on budget. No ifs, ands, or buts. Now, if one parameter of the triple constraint is modified, one of or both of the others are likely to be modified as well. So we have scope, schedule, and cost. If we achieve all three, we have quality. So schedule could be time, hours, week, but whatever you want to call it. Cost could be money, dollars, budget, but it's what you spend. So I call this the physics of the project. If you're listening to this video or watching this video and you have an engineering or physics background, there's a thing called Ohm's law. Voltage equals current times resistance. Not necessary for the test, but if current goes up, resistance goes down. If voltage stays the same, for example, that the three of them work together. And that's how this is. Scope drives schedule drives cost. If you add scope, then schedule or cost goes up. If you cut time or you cut money, then scope's probably going to have to go down. Now, from there, the traditional approach basically calls for a great deal of planning. So if you're doing a waterfall or traditional project environment, there's nothing wrong with planning. I'm in the process of updating our online content to a new digital platform, and I had 4 major versions of our product line in that questions database. And I didn't just say, let's hack the database and start moving stuff into the new application. I planned out what I thought I would need. Then I went in there and started looking for how I could tell what it would be that I needed versus what I didn't need. And then I looked at how I was going to have to reformat it and package it, and then how I was going to potentially import it. And so I'm still doing some planning. I was cleaning some data last night, making adjustments. So there's nothing wrong with planning. Plan the work the plan. And so that there's nothing wrong with planning. Now, the second one here, unless otherwise stated, assume you're fairly mature in doing projects. So unless the question says you're new at this, unless it's something like that, assume it isn't your first project. And then, like you heard me say, you plan the work, you work the plan. So you create the project management plan, then you execute it. Now, the next one, issues should be corrected as soon as possible. So letting them linger is more expensive and time consuming. Let me clarify here. So if I describe something like a problem on a project and I ask what you do first, what you might do first would be put it on an issue log if that's an option. If I ask you instead what fixes the problem, putting it on an issue log doesn't fix the problem. Putting it on an issue log gets it visibility. It gives it the ability to be tracked. But whatever would potentially fix the problem, whether that's we need a new software license, we need a different laptop, we need a new microphone, then fix the problem. FTP, not file transfer protocol, but FTP, fix the problem. So that would actually, whatever the problem is, resolving it would fix it, but what you might do first would be to put it on an issue log. Now, the final one on this page, ideally your influential stakeholders are going to be identified as soon as possible so you can take their needs into consideration. And so, So the zip code I live in, some of my kids' friends, let's just say some of them are a little hoity-toity and spoiled. And I told my kids early on, as soon as you're going to be legally old enough to work, I'm going to have no issue with you getting a job, because working builds character. And I want you to know the value of $1. And if I'm just giving you money, you're not going to know the value of $1. Well, guess what? Those kids grew up, 14 and 16 as of this recording, and they're when I hear the 16-year-old complain, or not complain, but make statements about so and so, she doesn't understand why her mom or dad won't buy her this or that, and my daughter will say, I told her, do you know how much money that is? Okay. So where I'm going with that is, you want to figure out who these key stakeholders are so you can factor their needs into the plan. Because if not, when they do show up, then you're going to have to readjust the plan. So you might as well have them there to begin with to put the initial plan in place. Now, the first one on this screen, assumptions should not be made that work is done just because the team believes it is. So like when I have people help me do product development, if I have, like at one point I had 4 people in a room, and each of them had a little desk set up in the corner, and somebody was new apparently, and they said, hey, I just finished this thing. And somebody turned around and said, has Tony seen it yet? And they go, no. And they go, you're not done yet then. So, until you have customer sign off, it's not done. Now, per control quality, you might think, we've tested it, we believe it's good. Okay, cool. Now let's do validate scope and get it to the customer to accept it. Now the second one, roles and responsibilities, the way we describe them in the book here as it relates to exam questions, are what you should apply, regardless of how you do it at work. So if like one time I interviewed for a job, and they wanted the title was project coordinator. And when I interviewed, I walked away going, that's a program manager. In other words, project management type people would report to them. And I'm thinking, they are really going to come in with a lowball offer. And sure enough, they did. So regardless of what you call roles at work, as far as job titles and things, focus on what we're going to talk about in our content here. Now, ITTOs are the next piece here. So I've got a separate video that's already out on YouTube about this. It's been out there, I don't know, a year or so, over 16,000 views the last I knew. It apparently works really well. I mean, I think it does, but people really like it. So inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. So if that phrase is new to you, I'm going to clarify briefly here. When you have a process like develop project management plan, there's some combination of inputs that work with some combination of tools and techniques to create some combination of outputs. Tools and techniques we don't differentiate. They're in the same bucket. So, currently in the 6th edition PMBOK guide, there's over 1,400 inputs, tools, techniques, and outputs. You're not going to memorize these. If you do, I wouldn't trust you on a project, because I would think you probably don't have a lot of common sense to recognize a problem when it's coming at you, because you go, let me see which ITO I deal with this. Not saying if you try to memorize these you don't have common sense. I just hope you would give up and not waste a lot of time trying to memorize it. Patterns are what I'm going to emphasize with you with our content. And this is one of those patterns. Anytime it's something analysis or something technique, it's always going to be a tool and technique. It will never be an input. It will never be an output. Again, something analysis, something technique will always be a tool and technique. Never an input, never an output. And outputs are documents that are created by a process. Deliverables are probably the biggest exception. But generally speaking, outputs are documents, and then they're inputs to other processes. So thus things get all traced around, if you will, kind of like spaghetti. It gets connected. Now, anytime you have an update, it's going to always be an output, like project management plan updates, project document updates. Okay, so if you got a question that translated to which of the following is an output of this, if update is an option, that's possible. If you were asked which of the following is an input to this, and one answer was PMP or project management plan updates. You could get rid of that answer because that would never be an input. Okay, so anyway, now, reality is not often addressed in the question. So a lot of times people, they choke on these theory pills because they try to apply their experience too much. So here's the deal. You got to have enough experience to qualify for the test, but if you rely on that experience too much, you get in trouble. So, yeah, well, bottom line is, if you need more time or money to do the project, you can't do it for less time or less money than it takes. So, so don't overcomplicate it. If you get an ethical question that implies you need a software license and you don't have the money to get it, then I don't know. Borrow a laptop with the license on it. Tell them you're going to need more money to get the license. Take the money out of your own pocket. Don't know, but if there's an answer about borrow it, or take a license, get a trial copy, bad answer. So anyway, now we got some agile theory pills. So agile projects are generally more adaptable than waterfall or traditional projects. So a hybrid phrase is somewhere between agile and waterfall. So it's got a little bit of both. And the thing is, with the agile piece, we expect adaptability. We kind of know what the end result needs to look like, or at least generally we know the direction we're going, and we reserve the right to adjust and adapt as we go. Thus, the adaptable part. Now, typically, agile projects do not have a project manager. They would have a scrum master, which focuses on how the work gets done, and they would have a product owner, which focuses on what work is being done. Like, what do I want as a product owner? So, like with Crosswind, I'm the founder, and I'm chief product owner. I try to pay attention to my customers, try to pay attention to the market, figure out what directions I see things going, and make decisions based on what we need to be doing as an organization.